All right, guys, it's Monday, so you know what time it is. It's time to deep dive the ADP shifts over the last week. This is the final one we'll be doing in the month of September. We have 3 more of these ADP shift shows coming up before the season begins, September 7th, 14th, and then the 21st, right before the NBA debuts on October 22. I meant to say October, obviously not September. I'm Dan Bespers. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Bespers. You can follow the network feed at Old Man Squad on social. And then, of course, we also now have TikTok and Instagram. TikTok is at Old Man Squad. Instagram is Old Man Squad Fantasy. I know it's annoying that I didn't get the same one, but you're going to have to bear with me on that. Like, rate, subscribe. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the like button before you do anything else. It actually is extremely important. The faster you do it, the faster this thing just drops into more feeds. And, of course, if you're listening on some traditional podcast app, subscribe, and a 5-star review does go a long way. Before we dive into all the ADPs, I want to remind you guys that today's show is brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the actual games. Think you know your stuff? Great. Get in on a $200,000 mega contest to pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of that $200,000. And when the games are over, roll on into the casino, the online casino. Get in on some blackjack or poker or unwind with over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. Today, we have 29. I know I'm an idiot. We have 29 names to cover on today's show, so we're going to be hustling. What's the line? I feel like, what's the actor's name that played Johnny English slash, oh, Lord, this is going to bug me for a minute. Rowan Atkinson. I got there. Rowan Atkinson. I believe in Rat Race, he has a line where he says, "We are holding ice." All right, so today, that's what we got to do on the podcast. That was a very circuitous route to get to. We need to move quick on today's show. But this is your weekly look at ADP shifts. Basically, who are the folks that are moving earlier, quicker? Who are the folks that are moving later, quicker? Does that turn them into guys that we are now targeting or avoiding on the actual draft board? And so far, we've actually come across a few guys that have moved from one side of the line to the other, guys like a Kyrie Irving, who, by the way, is the first name on the continued fallers board when we get there today, who just keeps moving from guy we didn't want anything to do with early in the second round to guy who's now become really interesting late in the second round. But we ain't at the fallers yet. We're going to start with the risers, because I'm nothing if not an optimist here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Here are your 15 risers and what they mean for your draft day strategy. James Harden is on the list again. He is a constant riser, up to 19.3, and I expect that to continue going earlier because James Harden, we have the Kawhi Leonard stuff going on. You know, he was moving earlier even before the Kawhi might not be ready to get this thing going on time news broke. And now I've got to think that continues. He moved faster this week than the previous one, but he's been bumping up about 1 ADP slot per week lately, at least. But for Harden, he's moved up 7.4 overall during this draft season. That's a big jump for someone going in the early going. I believe it's the single biggest jump for anyone that was pre-ranked inside the top 25. And frankly, it's really not all that close. Other than we mentioned Kyrie going the other way, that's like the next closest one is those two guys' ships passing in the night. So Harden likely to go by the time this is all done. If you do your drafts in a couple of weeks, probably early-ish second round would be my guess. And I still kind of like him there, especially on the Kawhi Leonard going to miss a little bit of time news. Yes, we're probably getting close to pricing out Harden, not at 19.3 where he's at right now, but where he's really ahead, which is like 15. There isn't a ton of room there, but there's still a little bit. And frankly, I'm okay with Harden, especially on the head-to-head side because of the way his fantasy game is constructed as a end of the first round turn kind of guy. I'm okay with. And then Roto, maybe 2-3 slots deeper, but I still think there's room. LaMelo Ball up to 25.9 on the latest board. He's been moving more lately, which is interesting because he dropped the very first week this all started. He went down 2 slots, and since then he's moved up about 4. So there was this back off and then he's like going to wear knee braces or ankle braces rather, and then everybody decided they didn't care about the last few years. And now he's up at about 26. 25.9 is the number. He's another dude who jumped about 1 over the last week, and I don't know if that's going to continue forward. I'm still a bit frightened, to be perfectly honest with you guys, of LaMelo Ball. And I know in a punt turnovers build, he's great. And in a punt turnover and field goal build, he's an absolute Goliath. And so it starts to become a little bit like the Joel Embiid phenomenon, which is like, okay, yeah, you've got this thing hanging over the dude, but if he's at the end of the first round, you kind of have to. Same story with LaMelo, end of second round. If he's there at like 24, 25, the other guys going around him don't have anywhere near the potential that he has to explode in a given season, especially when you're thinking about the different builds you can put him into. So LaMelo is probably still okay in terms of a value at 25.9. If he moves a couple slots earlier, meaning sort of like on his way, like most of the time I think you're seeing LaMelo go at about 22 to 24 range in drafts. If it moves earlier than that, that's probably where I just say nah. But right now, I think you can accommodate the injury risk and just say this is probably all right for LaMelo. Karl-Anthony Towns is the next name on the board, and I didn't put him on there because things changed a ton for Cat yet. He moved up 0.8 over the last week, but that's because the trade news broke over the weekend. So we only had like a day and a half to process that. His ADP is going to jump. I would assume his pre-rank jumps the next time Yahoo puts out a board, which is probably going to be soon. They usually do at least one more adjustment before the season starts. And when that happens, I would expect Cat to get adjusted up into the 20s, and then you'll really see his ADP bounce. So 33.5, I still love Cat, and I said it on a show over the weekend. I think Cat has a really good shot to be a late second rounder this year. Basically, and I don't want to repeat too much of this, go watch the big trade breakdown episode if you want to know more on my Cat thoughts. But the main idea is Cat's going to get a lot better, getting center statistics, more rebounds, more blocks, possibly a better field goal percent. But really, the rebounds and the blocks are the big one. And it's going to bring him back not that far from what he did a couple of years ago when he was a late first rounder. The problem is that fantasy has changed. If Cat puts up the exact same numbers he did, whatever it was, 3 seasons back, and he was like number 10 that year, if he puts up those same numbers right now, he's like 8 to 10 slots later, just because other players got better fantasy-wise around that area. It's the Kevin Durant phenomenon from this past season. KD put up a monster year, and he was like number 11. If he did that same line 5 years ago, he probably would have been number 4. More and more guys are just putting up bigger and bigger numbers. It's pinball-style stuff lately. So, yes, I think Cat gets better, but even if he puts up what we called in the past first-round Cat numbers, that's probably second round now in the year of our fantasy lord 2024. It's just not as good as it was 5 years ago. I still love it, though. Jalen Williams is up to number 40.5 now. He's another dude that's been slowly rising. It took a while, but it's starting to catch on now. I still love him at 40.5. I would absolutely take Jalen Williams there. I would take him as early as 30. I don't want to go much earlier than that. But I think he's going to have a really good season. And we've talked about that 1,000 times. Zach LaVine up to 67.9. This is easily the earliest he's been at any point during this draft campaign. Started at 76.2, an overall move of 8.3 for Zach. And I think a lot of that is on the news that he's sort of, call it, quote unquote, bought in on whatever Chicago's doing right now, which is like semi-rebuild. Instead of ripping the Band-Aid off, they're doing this half measure, which is terribly stupid. And maybe they'll lean into it, and maybe they'll move LaVine, or maybe they'll move Vooch, or maybe they'll move both. But right now, they're both still there. And so with LaVine, I thought at 76, he was a sweet value because you're going to get his relatively efficient scorer, and if he was really chugging, he had top 50 potential. 67.9 and on the rise is getting a little bit iffy because the possible trade cloud is still hanging over him. On a per-game basis, I think LaVine can beat this. I don't know if I would say easily with a million other guards in Chicago now, but again, DeRozan's gone, so there should be plenty for him to do. But plenty for LaVine to do is probably still in the 50 to 70 range. But if anything goes wrong, a trade, an injury, whatever, then he falls outside of this quickly, and then there's no way to know if he gets back into it. I suppose the thought is, well, whoever might trade for LaVine would probably give him a whole bunch of usage. But what if that team is the Lakers? What if he goes from being the number 2 in Chicago, he might even be the number 1, to the number 3 in LA? That's just empirically not good. So I think we're getting to the point where I'm probably not in on LaVine anymore. I think him moving up almost a full round at this point, 2/3 of a round. But again, ADP movement tells you they're actually going farther in that direction. We may have gone a little too far with LaVine. And so is the same story for Cam Thomas, whose ADP is all the way up to 75.3 now. He started at 83.4, which I thought was kind of a fun shot to take. At 75.3, if you're not punting field goal, we've priced him out. If you are, have at it, because it's going to be fun. He's going to score a ton, and then there's going to be a dearth of everything else. But you can't take that anchor weight in field goal percent. Even if he shoots 45%, the volume is going to be so high that he's doing some real damage there. So, build type, I guess, is probably the answer here. I'm probably not taking him in many 9-category leagues where I'm actually competing in field goal percent, because 75.3 is where the ADP says. But in reality, again, he's probably going a few slots earlier than that. And in most drafts, we're seeing him go end of the 6th, beginning of the 7th. So this does track. Meanwhile, you've got Bradley Beal at 81.7, who, in my opinion, I know there's a bigger injury risk with Beal than with maybe either LaVine or Cam Thomas. I think Beal on a per-game basis probably beats both of those guys in 9-cat. Bradley Beal's a pretty good 9-category fantasy player, actually, especially with the efficiency numbers he was able to post in Phoenix last year. He gets steals, he gets blocks, he gets some rebounds out of the guard spot, he gets some assists. He'll score a bit, not like it was in Washington, but good percentages, good defensive stats on top of the fact that he can score a little bit. Those are the types of players that usually go in the 5th, and he's going in the late 7th. I like Beal still here anyway, even though he's on the way up, and he's a big jumper this year. He started at 90.8, and he's at 81.7 now. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to have to start thinking about, has he gone too far soon? But not yet. And such is the same story with Isaiah Hartenstein. He and Beal are, obviously they're very different fantasy players, but from a ADP analysis standpoint, they're pretty much the same to me. They started so painfully late that even though they've made absurd forward leaps, it's still not far enough. I think much like with Beal, who I believe cruises into top 60 per game numbers, I think Hartenstein cruises into top 70 per game numbers, and he's at 82.3, but he's also jumped 9.9 over fantasy season and just continues to go earlier and earlier and earlier. And I think I was in a draft last week where he went at 68. And I thought, okay, yeah, now we've done too much. But in the 80s, and frankly, even the 70s, I'm still good with Hartenstein. I still think we have a little bit of room there, but he's closing in on it. Meanwhile, and I don't know why I put him back on the board, maybe just to stress the fact that it's very silly. Clint Capella is up to 86.1, which is fine if you're punting free throws, but I still don't recommend it, even in that instance. Okay, if you're punting free throws, he probably beats that mark. But, and I know Mitchell Robinson is off the board now because of injury, there are still, even with Robinson out, 3 or 4 much cheaper, when I say cheaper, I mean just guys going later, punt free throw style big men that are going 2 to 3 rounds later, so you can still get the stuff for your punt free throw team that's a little harder to get in this range, in the late 8th, early 9th round. And I know the players around Capella on the board are not ultra exciting, but in a punt free throw team, you're probably going to lack for points. You can still get Anthony Simons or Jordan Poole. You might lack for assists. I don't know. Not that big assist guys are going near there, but we're going to talk about Austin Reaves a little bit later. He's going close to that, and he'll probably be around 5. This one just makes no sense to me at all, so let's keep going. Trey Murphy III is all the way up to 94. I have to admit, he was not one of the names I had pegged as a giant forward bouncer, but he's up 7.8 over the entirety of this fantasy season run-up, all the way up to number 94. He actually went down by 0.8 during the very first week, and so since then, he's actually up 8.6. And it doesn't look like he's slowing down anytime soon. And I'll admit, I like Trey Murphy's fantasy game a ton. He showed last year that he can sort of slot in alongside the big dogs and still put up decent numbers. But I just hate the fact that the Pelicans have a billion players to try to wedge in together. You've got everyone from last year that was in the pecking order ahead of Trey Murphy, which I think you could argue was probably Zion, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum. Dano, you're forgetting somebody, but whatever. We'll loop back around to it. And this year, you add DeJounte Murray into that mix. But there really isn't anybody that was ahead of Trey Murphy that's now moved behind him. So he just slid down one notch. What are you going to say? Like Jonas Valanciunas? But he was, starter in name only. He was a sino. Trey Murphy may be coming off the bench. I don't care about that part of it. That's not the thing that scares me. It's just that, where does the opportunity come from? And the hope, I think, is that Brandon Ingram gets moved, because then it's very clear and obvious. Okay, great. That's the spot you're taking. But he's going to kind of have to get shoehorned in, and he will, because he's important to what they do. And his fantasy game is super translatable. He was number 66 in 9-cat last year. Admittedly, a decent chunk of that was on 0.6 turnovers, 15 points, 3 threes, 5 boards. That's all good stuff. But I don't know how it goes up without a personnel shift. That's the part that frightens me a tad. In any event, let's keep going, because we're not going as fast as I said I would. OG Anunoby is finally making the big forward jump that we knew had to happen at some point. We started at 100, went down to 102, and stayed there for about 3 weeks. And now all of a sudden, somebody kickstarted the OG Anunoby hype train. I don't know what the hell it was, but he's humming now. He's up to 97.9. He's jumped basically 3.5 over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Actually, it's more like 5 over the last 3 weeks. And I have to admit, I'm starting to get a little nervous about the OG thing, more about the fact that his body is breaking down constantly than about the actual fantasy appeal. And so in my eyes, at this point, I'd probably just rather go with an Alex Caruso or a Herb Jones, who, again, I know Pelicans, but these guys are going to do things similar to OG. And I just have a little bit more trust in, not necessarily Caruso. He plays himself into injuries all the time. But you've also got Jalen Suggs in there, another semi-injury prone dude. I don't know. I guess those guys are all kind of interchangeable. I don't know that one is necessarily a better choice than the other. If only that, maybe you could get those other guys I mentioned a little bit later than OG right now, half round later. Does that help much? I don't know. Maybe. But they're all going to do relatively similar stuff. Suggs will be a little better in steals than, say, I don't know, Herb. Herb will be a little bit more efficient. Caruso might be the best blocks guy. Or maybe it's OG. I think it'll all balance out a little bit. For whatever reason, I'm somewhat soured on OG having him moving this fast now. He's still fine, by the way, at 97.9. But if this is a sign of him starting to go towards the mid to early 90s, I'd rather just go with those other guys, 2/3 of a round to a round later. RJ Barrett at 98.7. I'm still not doing this one unless the free throws somehow fix themselves, which they are not. I also don't necessarily believe that he can stay as efficient from 2. I think he was going on a finishing heater, which does happen from time to time. And even if he keeps the better shot profile, I still think there's a little bit of a fall off there. So I'm out still on Barrett. Ivica Zubats is up to 99.4. we are starting to inch towards pricing him out. He's moved 8.6 slots since this whole thing began. He was one of my favorites at 108. And basically now that was end of 9th round, and pretty soon he's going to be end of 8th round. And frankly, you're seeing him go in expert drafts even earlier than that. I don't think Zubats is better than like a top 75 guy, which, still means there's a little bit of wiggle room here, but it isn't that like big jump that we were hoping for when the numbers first came out. So I'm going to tentatively say still soft yes on Zubats. Naz Reid had his first real move of the fantasy campaign. He'd been bouncing back and forth between like 100 and 101. He actually fell as far as 103.8, but now jumps all the way back up to 102. That's a big shift in 1 week, about 2 slots. And this, to me, is sort of like the first impact of the Cat is gone phenomenon, where you're like, oh, well, okay, Cat was like the backup center behind Rudy Gobert, but we saw a lot of Naz in that role anyway. He and Cat played side by side in a way that didn't really work with Gobert. So is there a little bit more for Naz Reid? Maybe. It's not, I don't think it's as clear cut as folks would, or as like some of my Twitter followers would have me believe, because I didn't mention Naz Reid. I called him a little bit of a wild card. I don't know that they changed dramatically how they were going to use him. I think he was going to get more playing time this year because Kyle Anderson isn't there anymore. So that opened up more power forward minutes. So that had already happened. I don't know that this trade really changes much between the pre and post trade as much as the Kyle Anderson thing was the big bump forward for him. Because you bring in a power forward in Randall, who's going to play the same number of minutes basically as Cat. It's just that, if Cat was listed as the center and Naz Reid was next to him, was Naz the power forward? Like, we're kind of getting a little bit pedantic with this thing. Like, if those two guys are on the floor together, they're just the 4 and the 5. And so I think you're going to see a similar thing with Naz and Julius Randle. But as long as Rudy Gobert's healthy, he's going to play 30-plus minutes. So that backup center minute bucket is going to be whatever it was last season. How many minutes did Gobert play last year? 34. So there were only 14 backup center minutes last season. And I don't think that's going to change much. So you get the 14 backup center minutes. You get whatever the backup power forward minutes behind Cat last year. And then without Kyle Anderson chewing up half of those, you get a few more for Naz Reid. So that's the move forward for Naz. It's like he's not fighting with slow-mo for the backup power forward minutes anymore. He has like first right of refusal to those, basically. And Randall coming in to play the starting power forward is the same as Cat playing the starting power forward. So just think about it from a minute standpoint. Don't think about it so much from like, oh, who's the center, who's the power forward. It's how many backup minutes are there between those two positions? Last year was about 30. And Kyle Anderson, I don't have the advanced stats in front of me right now, but I think he played probably like 20 some odd of those. And so Naz Reid got his 20 some odd minutes, which was like the backup center minutes and a few of the power forward minutes. Was that enough for him last year? Almost. He played 24 minutes a game and he was number 119. You get him to like 26 minutes, he's probably a top 100 guy, and that's probably around what you're looking at with Naz this year. It's 26, 27 minutes a ball game, probably 80 to 100 range. So, yeah, I mean, this is fine. But if people are like, oh, Naz Reid's going to go top 50, probably not. Although I guess if he fixes his percentages, that would be a way for him to kind of make like a double jump. Yes, like a video game. Daniel Gafford, 110.5. He's been on the move in a way that was kind of quietly on the move. He was 114 to start, jumped 5 slots up, then dropped 3 slots down, and now he's back up 2 again. So he's a real polarizing fantasy play from a week-to-week basis. I'm fine with him here, by the way. 10th round on Gafford, totally good with that because he can post numbers in 22-ish minutes a ball game. We know that. Like legitimately good ones, and he can post serviceable ones in 19 or 20 minutes a game. So sure, why the hell not? And he's not going to kill your free throw as much as, like a Derek Lively or a Trace Jackson Davis or something like that. I'd probably rather go Okongwu, even if Gafford has the better shot to be a better per game number I think Okongwu has the better shot to hit a ceiling higher. But again, like whatever way you want to go there is totally fine with me. All right. It took us 25 minutes to get through the fallers, so we're not exactly hauling butt the way that I claimed that we would. But let's take a quick break for a commercial because my voice is tired. All right, here are your fallers. We'll move through a little quicker on these ones just because I took too long on the risers. Kyrie Irving down to number 21 now, and I said it last time. If he continues to go that direction, Kyrie's moving onto our targets board. So I think I have to follow that up by saying Kyrie's now a target because he's going 21 or later, as evidenced by the ADP continuing to slowly fall for him. And I'm in. I'm back in on Kyrie after being out for the first, 4 weeks of this ADP tracking. Started at 15.5 now, and he's all the way down at 21. Kawhi Leonard down to 34.3. It'll keep falling, undoubtedly, because of the news that he's not really ready yet. And I know we still got 3 weeks left before the season starts, but that ain't enough. And they're going to kid glove him, and he's going to sit the back-to-backs. And this basically guarantees that, 62 games is the best-case scenario for Kawhi this year. So I would look at him as a 4th rounder now, and I'd love to get him in the 5th, but I guess we'll see where he actually ends up. Jalen Johnson. I can't explain this one. Started at 36.8. He's down to 41.7. I don't know what people don't like about Jalen Johnson because I do like about Jalen Johnson. He was in the 40s last year, and I know he had the injury stuff. He only played in 56 games. But last season, without the Hawks carving out a perfect role for him, he jumped into the 4th round. This year, by all accounts, the Hawks have carved out a role for Jalen Johnson. The minutes won't change. He played 34 minutes a game when he was healthy. So you can expect the rebounds and the steals and the blocks to basically stay the same. What I would say is likely to change is the usage stuff, meaning points, threes, assists, field goal, free throw percent impact, and turnovers. Field goal is good. Free throw is slightly worse than field goal is good. But obviously, if that gets a little better, then terrific. You can't bank on that. But if it happens, great. So I would assume the points go up, the threes go up, the assists probably go up. The field goal impact gets better. Free throw impact gets worse. And turnovers get a little bit worse as well. So 4 things going up, 2 things going down. He was already ranked 43 last year. I think Jalen Johnson actually shot to be a late 20s guy. So I love the fact that he's falling. And unlike Kyrie, who started as a no and became a yes, Jalen Johnson went from a soft yes to a really big one. Desmond Bane down to 42.6. I think this is a very fair place for Desmond Bane. By the way, I'll also note on him, I didn't think he was going to keep falling like this because Bane started at 33.5, which was way too early. Quickly fell to 41. Now he's down to 42 and change. If he falls into the mid to late 40s, I think Bane then becomes a target. Jared Allen down to 49.4. I don't know why he continues to drop because he's a really safe play around 50, so I like him there. He's not exciting, but it'll do. Devin Vassell, this is on the news that he is dealing with a strained tendon. He should not be drafted here anymore. This is only a small drop-off, by the way, considering he opened at 68.1, fell all the way to 72, climbed to 69, and now he's back down in the back half of the 69s. This is, I got to watch my phrasing, way too early for a player dealing with injury. I liked Vassell's fantasy prospects this season, but I don't want them here, and I don't think that I would draft him, frankly, inside the top 90 anymore. Austin Reaves. This one came out of nowhere. He had fallen 1.5, I should say, over the first 5 weeks of tracking. So almost no change at all. And then dropped a full slot this past week. There wasn't any news on the Lakers. Literally nothing other than JJ Redick putting out a quote that D'Angelo Russell was going to be a big part of what they did. Yeah, I mean, duh. He's there. He's a starter. He's going to have to be. Doesn't change anything about what Austin Reaves is. And Austin Reaves is an 80s ranked guy. So it's not like he's a massive value here. It's just weird to see him drop because nothing really changed. I'm totally fine, by the way, with Reaves at 84.1. I don't think that he's a steal or a bust. I think he's an even money. But it was just weird. Jonas Valanciunas down to 86.5. It wasn't a big drop. He only fell by 0.7, but it continued a trend for JV, who had already fallen 7.7. And now he's finally getting closer to where I thought he might be ranked to start draft season. Remember, Valanciunas opened up at 78.1. And out of the gate, the first thing I said was, come on. Because I thought he was going to be an amazing grab for us. Piling up stats for 4 months with the Wizards before he got traded. I figured he was going to go near 100 because people were like, oh, lumbering Ox JV had a bad season, as we all knew he would in New Orleans. And, primed to sort of rebuild his numbers a little bit. But there's no way I was going to spend a seventh round pick on him. Not with the guys that you could also have that are going to last for a full season with one team. Well, anyway, he has now fallen into the very beginning of the 9th round, I believe. I mean, he was an early 8th, I guess, to start. And we're getting there. We are getting there. I still don't think I'm quite all the way, but I would take JV in the 90s, if only because, the chances of getting a top 40, top 50 type guy for half the season is just so damn appealing for a games cap player like myself. Head to head, I don't think I would take JV inside the top 100. Although, it'd be damn helpful to have a guy like that, even if you can't count on him for your playoffs. But there's just other guys around there. Head to head, you gotta get someone who you think is going to be playing well in March, and I don't think JV will. And for Roto games cap or even head to head games cap, it doesn't matter quite as much. But with your playoffs head to head, it does. Jordan Poole still falling and fast, down to 96.1. He's falling almost 2 a week. Nobody wants anything to do with Jordan Poole, and I think it's post-hype time. I said it last week. I was already good with him going at 94.5, so I'm definitely good with him going at 96. It feels like we're on our way to Poole getting drafted outside the top 100. I would 100% take that chance. 100 times out of 100. I don't even care how it goes. I think Jordan Poole has a shot to be a top 75 guy when things settle in because he does have those negatives. And if you're punting turnovers, he has a chance to be a lot better than that. But boy, talk about people getting a sour taste in their mouth. And I get it. He was terrible last year, and we faded him. And now it's time to back him. Got to know when to make your move. Making our move now. Jalen Suggs, another guy who's just tumbling, almost as fast as Jordan Poole. Damn close. Both of those guys have fallen a full round in ADP. That's a ton for dudes inside the top 100. That's a ridiculous amount of movement. I think Jalen Suggs is totally fine around 100. It's where he should have been going to begin with, and he opened up at 86, which was wrong. And he might be an 86 ranked guy, but there was just no reason for him to be there when he had not shown the ability to be there yet. And I don't know that his role changes all that much other than to think, okay, maybe this guy gets 2 extra minutes a ball game because he didn't play max minutes all year, and maybe this is the season for it in Orlando. So give Suggs an extra couple of minutes. He goes from being like 105 rank to probably, 85 to 100 range. And so this is a totally fine place for him to go. John Collins finally went the other way. So this is the rare player who was going one direction and then you saw the kickback. Collins had jumped 11 slots prior to this past week from 114 to about, maybe more than that. He jumped almost 12 before the rebound. From near 114 to near 102. If you want to get exact, it was 113.7 to 101.4. So he had jumped 12. And a lot of it fast, and now jumped back down by 1.2. So I think people finally were just like, yeah, we're not going to go any pricier on John Collins, which is notable because it seemed like there was this freight train going forward, and it wasn't like we got a bunch of news out of Utah either. But I like this. This gives me peace of mind because, again, I would still wait. This, again, is another reason I believe to draft close to the start of the season, in addition to all the crazy trade and injury stuff that keeps coming out. But waiting on a starting rotation. We're waiting on a starting lineup. If John Collins is the starting center for Utah, he blows this ADP out of the water. If he's coming off the bench to play power forward or even playing the power forward spot as the starter, he doesn't. It's a little bit, it's like a much larger version of what we're hoping to see with Karl-Anthony Towns, because Collins went from a guy who wasn't rebounding or getting any defensive stats to doing all of that. Field goal percent got better. Rebounds got better. Blocks got better. Steals got better. Everything went up for him when he shifted to the bucket instead of a floor spacing 4. But we don't know what his position's going to be this year. We don't know what the hell Walker Kessler's job is going to be either. 3 more names on the Fallers board. Alex Caruso, much like John Collins, saw his little kickback right now. Caruso had moved from 110 to 104, and he fell back to 105. He had actually briefly gotten as high as 102, so Caruso went up real fast, came back down, went forward a little bit, and then bounced back down again. I think people still don't really know what they want to do with him. I think Caruso's a really good pick at 105, personally, because I think his role in Oklahoma City is going to be very close to what his role was in Chicago, and there's actually a universe where he does a tiny bit more. And I get it. He's not going to score. So anybody who's punting points is out here literally drooling down their face and needing a spittoon during this section. And everybody else is like, but I don't, man, well, stop whining. Still, Kindergarten Cop, great movie. Caruso's great at 105. He's actually incredibly safe, and I actually think there's a little bit of upside built in as well. Keontae George, the biggest faller in pretty much the entire fantasy landscape, who isn't hurt. Kristaps Porzingis and Mitchell Robinson are the only guys that have fallen farther than Keontae George, who opened near 98, and he's down at 117 now. And I still don't want him outside of punt, field goal, punt, turnover teams. There's almost no price you could put on Keontae George that would make me take him in traditional 9-cat without a specific build requirement. And so then I don't know why I keep putting him on the table here, other than just to accentuate the fact that he's fallen faster than almost anyone I've ever seen. And then Mitchell Robinson, I just wanted to put him on here to highlight the fact that due to the injury news, his drop sped up again. He fell from 111 to 120 over the first 3 weeks. Then he only dropped like 3.5 over the next couple. And now he fell almost 4 over the last week again. Do not draft Mitchell Robinson under any circumstance. He's on the board just so that I could remind you guys of that. I will also mention, and I didn't put him on the board here, so you're not going to see his name on YouTube, Chris Middleton, with the news that broke over the weekend that he's not quite ready to start playing the full tilt stuff. I don't want anything to do with him. And I've said it before. He was on my do not draft board because I just think his body is busted now. And I hate that because for many years, he was a prime target. He was an old man squad favorite with the 50, 40, 90 appeal, like getting a lot of stuff on good percentages. He hasn't been close to right for 2 full seasons. He had 2 surgeries this offseason on, well, 1 surgery on both ankles, so however you want to frame it. And, you know, I started to feel a little bit better because we talked to Josh late last week, and he was like, look, I talked to somebody in Milwaukee, and they said this is a pretty routine cleanup. And yeah, that's probably true, but Middleton is just no longer a routine guy. He's not a routine healer. And so I remain petrified of Chris Middleton, and I want nothing to do with him because I think it's going to be back-to-back rests. I think there's going to be low-minute games. I don't know when his season begins. I think you're looking at, 65 games as a best-case scenario, and I hate to take guys like that, especially when it's if you're not in a games cap. I guess that changes it a little bit. If you're in a games cap and you can get Middleton at like 110, sure, why not? You just bench him when he sits, or if they're messing around with his minutes, and when he gets back up into the high 20s, then you deploy him. But if you're not in a games cap format, I think he's going to be a massive, massive headache. And I know I didn't put him on the list here, even though because he was still moving up. I still think it was like residual upward movement before the news broke over the weekend that he wasn't quite ready. I think we'll see probably that downward trend, and we'll probably put him on a board next week just so we could talk about him a little bit. All right, I got through 29 names in 40 minutes. That's not bad. Can't kill me too much. I know I talk a lot. 'Tis my cross to bear. I am Dan Bespris, still. Sporting my Mario Kart shirt. What does it say on this thing? Since 1992? Yeah, I'm older than that. I got you by a little Mario Kart. At Dan Vespers on social, please do follow Old Man Squad on Twitter and TikTok. Follow Old Man Squad Fantasy over on Instagram. But most importantly, while we're really making this push to grow during the run-up to the season, subscribe, leave a comment on the YouTube page. Even the comment is just the letter A. I don't care. But obviously, real words are probably better. And if you're watching on YouTube, 5-star reviews are big for those that want to help boost us on Apple and Spotify. Those go a long way. Thank you all for watching. This is your ADP risers and fallers. I don't know. Is this the third or fourth one of these we've done? 3 more to go, baby. We're in count up mode. Last day of September here. We'll have another show for you this afternoon. I did a poll on Twitter to see what everybody wanted the most, and it was almost a dead heat. People want draft paths for each slot, meaning here are the 3 or 4 players that are usually available to you in the 3rd round if you have the 3rd pick or something like that. And here's how I would build a team around it. That one's a tough one. That one's going to require a lot of prep that I may not have time for today. Other options, best no punt team and ADP battles of round 2. These are all coming up here in the next couple of episodes. Someone was asking about what to do when the draft goes wrong. So maybe that's like a special weekend episode of draft day pivots, or here are ways that things could get messy. But in any event, we got a lot of fun stuff coming up. I'm sure Yahoo's going to adjust their board. We also have lots of guests coming up, and I had to postpone one today because I'm an idiot, and I forgot my kid had a makeup baseball game this evening. But we're going to be chatting with Mitch Casey of the Ball Boys Fantasy Show. That'll be next Monday instead of today. So that was going to be today, but that'll be next week. Also this week, we're going to talk to Dan Palio. Thunder Dan's back on the show. Adam Stock back on the show. Matt Lawson back on the show. And much later on this week, Dan Titus will get a little update on what's going down over at Yahoo as well. In addition, we're just going to get everybody scheduled from the mock draft. So Noah Rubin is not too far away. I think that'll probably be next week. I'm forgetting so many names, and I'm going to feel bad about it. Rick Lean coming up not too far from now. Adam King. We got a few shows planned, Adam and I do. Adam and Eric Ong will be on the show at some point soon to break down an auction mock. So the point here is there's a lot left to do. Have a great middle of your Monday. I'm Dan. I'll talk to you guys in a little